On this week's political figure episode, whether it's Inslee or isn't Lee, it's Jay Inslee. Sorry, that one was lame. It was the best punny intro I had. J. Robert Inslee was born February 9th, 1951 in Seattle, Washington. He was an honor roll student and star athlete at Ingram High School, where he graduated from in 1969. Alright. After high school, he started studying medicine at Stanford, but he couldn't secure a scholarship. So he transferred to University of Washington, where he got a bachelor's in economics, and then went to Willamette School of Law and got his Juris Doctor because, politician. Practiced law for a few years before becoming politically active while advocating for the construction of a new high school in 1985. Then he ran for the Washington House of Representatives in 1988. Now, he was not favored to win this election, which would become a theme for Inslee, and he did win the election, which would also become a theme for Inslee. During this time, he made a name for himself by standing up to the Speaker of the House and his own party when it came to pushing legislation he thought was important and they found unpopular, advocating heavily for education and environmental policy that tended to be a little less popular in a somewhat more conservative state. Then in 1992, when the Republican incumbent for Washington's 4th decided not to run, Inslee entered the race for the U.S. House of Representatives, once again not expected to win, and once again winning. As a representative for Washington's 4th, he helped open up agricultural exports of apples to Japan, which seems like a very Washington thing to do, set up a fund to oversee the Hartford nuclear waste site, and was able to broker a deal to get the long-stalled Yakima River Enhancement Act passed. And if I said that wrong, I'm sorry. That was all in 2 years, because in 1994, he lost his bid for re-election. And while Republicans did have a pretty good midterm year in 1994, Inslee attributed his loss to his support for the assault weapons ban in 1992. A couple years later, he ran for governor of Washington and lost, but it was no big deal because Bill Clinton appointed him the regional director of the Health and Human Services Department. And the next election rolls around again in 1998, and he decides to run for Congress again, this time in Washington's 1st. And he'd definitely been knocked down, but he got up again. Oh, they're never going to keep him down, because he won that race and resumed his winning streak from then on out, being re-elected 6 more times. During his second tenure in Congress, he continued advocating heavily for climate change and environmental policies, arguing that the United States should start investing heavily in infrastructure and programs that would get us off of foreign oil and fossil fuels altogether, and in turn creating a lot of good-paying jobs and stimulating the economy. Basically, he was pushing Green New Deal policy before there was Green New Deal policy. He supported the National Park System enough to be awarded the Friends of the National Parks Award. He continued pushing for education funding and support. He criticized our invasion of Iraq. He voted for healthcare reform, including the ACA. And then in 2012, he decided to run for governor of Washington again, and he was not favored to win again, and he won again. Well, not again for the governorship this time, but like the first time for the governorship, but won again because he's never supposed to win. As governor, he's overseen a divided House for most of his tenure, which means that they can never decide on a budget. So he's had to call special sessions on special sessions on special sessions trying to get the state to pass a damn budget. And even though this seems to happen almost every damn time they pass a budget, he has somehow managed to keep the state from going into a shutdown or even a partial shutdown, which is pretty impressive. As governor, he supported unions in their fight to keep Boeing 777X production completely in Washington. He halted the death penalty in the state, increased education and mental health funding. He put up legislation to reduce Washington's carbon emissions and get utilities off of fossil fuels by 2050. Set up an expedited process to pardon people for low-level marijuana offenses. He restored voting rights to felons who have completely served their sentences. He increased capital gains taxes and taxes on profits over $250,000. And he sued Donald Trump for trying to ban Muslims. Y'all remember that? Trump signed that executive order banning people from Muslim countries coming to the United States. Then the state of Washington sued him because it wasn't constitutional, and then he wasn't allowed to do it anymore. That was Jay. In 2020, Jay Inslee made a bid for president that didn't go anywhere at all. So he was like, never mind, I'm going to run for governor again. So he was reelected to a 3rd term. And then when Andrew Cuomo resigned because he's a shitty, pervy old man, it made Jay Inslee the longest-serving current governor in the United States. However, his reign will soon likely come to an end as he has announced he will not be running for re-election this year. And I know I'm always talking about how people should step aside and let younger people in and stuff, and I stand by that, but I'm a little bummed that he's not running for re-election because no one in Washington State's history has ever won a 4th term as governor, and he'd likely have a pretty good chance, so it'd be cool to see him set the record. And honestly, for as long as he's been around in politics, he's remained a pretty stand-up politician as far as, politicians go. So I'm sure most people in Washington wouldn't hate to see him around a little longer, but he is old, and I do commend him stepping aside to make room for new blood. And hopefully Washingtonians, Washingtons, what the hell do we call you people? Anyway, hopefully people from Washington replace him with somebody who is just as good or better.